Do you know why so many men turn to Stoicism, but end up misunderstanding it, misapplying it, and eventually hurting themselves? Because they think Stoicism means becoming cold, emotionless, indifferent to life. They think a man shouldn't show emotion. That being Stoic means smirking through everything, never complaining, never blaming, never crying, never hurting. I used to believe that too. I used to think be strong meant clenching my teeth, holding it all in, pretending nothing touched me. But the truth is, that's not Stoicism. That's emotional paralysis. And it's a dangerous misunderstanding because Stoicism never teaches you to reject emotions. It teaches you to master them, to not let emotions control you, but also not to run from them. A Stoic still feels pain, sadness, fear. They just don't let those emotions make their choices for them. This common misunderstanding that Stoicism is about being emotionless comes from the lowercase word stoic in English, which means enduring without showing emotion. But capital Stoicism, the life philosophy of Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, is something entirely different. And if we step into Stoicism with the wrong belief, we don't become stronger, we become more isolated. Day by day, we drift farther from ourselves and the people around us. That is the first tragedy and the most common among men who haven't truly understood Stoicism. And I'll tell you more about that later, because this is just the first door that's been opened. So, if Stoicism isn't about being a cold, silent man who shoulders everything alone, then what is it, really? Stoicism is the ability to look straight at your emotions without being swallowed by them. It's when anger rises and you know it's rising, when fear flares up and you still hold on to reason. It's that space between knee-jerk reaction and chosen response. Epictetus called it the space of awareness, where you observe emotions like clouds passing across the sky without being dragged away by them. Not everyone has the patience to watch until the end, but those who do are always the ones who go further than the rest. If you're one of them, subscribe and like. We're on the same team. Seneca once wrote, "The wise man still suffers, still fears, for he is human, but he lives by reason." He doesn't let the temporary destroy what's lasting. He doesn't let impulsive feelings tear apart his inner values. And the greatest strength of a Stoic doesn't lie in what he can endure. It lies in how he chooses to respond. No blaming, no victimhood, no wasting energy on what's outside his control. He learns to distinguish what is his and what is not, what can be changed and what must be accepted. Marcus Aurelius, the greatest emperor of Rome, wrote in Meditations, "If it is natural, don't complain. If it is not, don't let it rule you." That is true freedom. When no one has the power to manipulate your mind, except you. Not emotionless, but feeling deeply, then choosing calmly. That is the heart of Stoicism. And it's also what many men today are desperately searching for, but heading down the wrong path to find. Because if we don't understand this, the consequences that follow will be even more serious. I'll tell you more about that in the next part. The problem isn't getting the theory wrong. It's living off track, pushing yourself into isolation. Because when a man believes Stoicism means not showing emotion, always being tough, always thinking no one can see me weak, he's not living strong. He's living in a cage. That cage has a name: emotional suppression. It doesn't explode immediately. It simmers quietly until one day it can't be held in anymore. I've met men who looked perfectly composed, successful, respected, articulate, always calm. But when a crisis hit, the loss of a wife, a job, or even just coldness from their children, they collapsed and couldn't get back up. No one saw it coming. No one could help because they had hidden themselves too well. That phenomenon, known in psychology as the rebound effect, means the more you suppress emotion, the stronger it pushes back. The more you deny sadness, the more hollow you feel. The more you reject pain, the more likely you are to lose control. The more you force yourself to be made of steel, the more fragile you become when the blow finally lands. And the saddest part is, they believe they're doing it right. They think Stoicism means no complaining, no talking, no expression, that they must endure in silence, control everything, rise above by suffocating themselves. They call it discipline, strength, masculinity. But in truth, it's just a shell. Inside is a soul no one dares to touch, a rainstorm of emotions cut off mid-fall, a forest no one enters for fear of getting lost. I've lived like that too. For years I acted like I didn't have emotions. When something sad happened, I stayed silent. When I was betrayed, I smirked. When I argued with loved ones, I just stayed busy to forget. Back then, I thought that was strength. But really, I was cutting myself off from connection. I wasn't close to anyone, not even myself. Then the insomnia started. Sudden bursts of anger, working without purpose, feeling empty for no reason. And I knew if I kept living like this, I'd lose the most important thing, myself. I've seen myself in so many other men. Some drown in alcohol to forget. Others bury themselves in work. Some chase physical relationships to fill their loneliness. Others go fully silent, no sharing, no talking, no asking for help. They live as if nothing can touch them. But the truth is, they're in pain. They just don't know how to say it. And if they do want to say it, they're afraid of being seen as weak. Because society teaches men to be tough, resilient, hard to break. A man who opens up is soft. A man who shares is weak. A man who sees a therapist must be broken. So they stay silent. And in that silence, they lose themselves, piece by piece. I remember an older friend once told me I held it together for 10 years, thought I was fine. Then one day, just because my kid said, "You don't understand me, Dad," I broke down. Not because he was wrong, but because I knew he was right. And I had no idea how to reconnect. You see, men don't break from the big hits. They break from the small cracks that go ignored. And once those cracks reach the roots, your values, your identity as a father, your bond with those you love, everything collapses before you can catch it. Stoicism isn't about becoming a machine. It's not about being a stone without feeling. Stoicism is calm, but not numb. It's observing emotions without being swept away. It's acknowledging that you hurt, you're angry, you're sad, but still keeping a clear head and a steady heart. A true Stoic man isn't someone who stays silent until he loses all connection. He's someone who understands himself deeply enough to know when to speak, when to let go, and when to embrace the pain as part of becoming wiser. Because if you don't, what you lose isn't just connection, but your very core. And this is exactly why, among millions seeking Stoicism, it's men who are most likely to get it wrong. The ones most likely to misinterpret it, to confuse toughing it out with self-mastery. And the ones who, without guidance, fall the deepest. And that is what I'll talk to you about next. Because men grow up in a society that teaches them to brace, to be tough, to stay silent, to handle it themselves. From a young age, when a boy cries, he's told, "Boys don't cry." When he shows weakness, he's told, "Be a man." When he's hurt, they say, "Stop being soft, get over it." And so that boy grows into a man who doesn't know how to express his feelings, doesn't know how to ask for help, doesn't know how to name his sadness, doesn't dare admit that sometimes he's tired, lonely, overwhelmed, because doing so would be seen as weak. Society doesn't give men the space to open up. And when they finally find Stoicism, something they think is a strong life philosophy, they carry all those old beliefs into it and start twisting the philosophy to serve the role they think they have to play. They don't dive into Epictetus. They don't sit with Seneca. They don't listen to Marcus Aurelius. They skim a few short quotes, endure and abstain, don't let emotions rule you, be indifferent to pain, and slap the label Stoic on a lifestyle of coldness, distance, and emotional shutdown. They don't know that Epictetus was a crippled slave who said, "We may suffer pain, but we don't have to be defined by it." They don't know that Seneca wrote, "No one is immune to pain. The wise man simply does not lose himself in it." They don't know that Marcus Aurelius, even as emperor, wrote page after page of journaling to keep himself grounded, to stop himself from hardening so much that he lost his humanity. But modern men do the opposite. They use Stoicism as armor to hide their fear of vulnerability. They think a blank face is emotional control. They think not complaining is strength. They think needing no one is freedom. They don't realize that real strength isn't silence, it's facing what's inside. That real freedom isn't needing no one, it's not being controlled by anyone's emotions. And that real maturity isn't carrying everything alone, it's knowing who to share with, what to let go, and when to act. Men often misuse Stoicism because they use it to avoid. Avoid therapy because I'm fine. Avoid journaling because that's for women. Avoid meditation because it's a waste of time. Avoid talking about feelings because they're afraid of being judged. They live like machines. Everything must be logical, clean, in control. But inside is a chaotic storm of emotion, with no outlet, no one allowed in, no one who knows. They live in a crowded world, yet feel utterly alone. And when life hits, they break. Because they were never truly prepared for emotions to arrive. They don't have the language to name their pain. They don't have deep enough connections to be pulled out of it. I knew a man in his 40s, wife, kids, good job, living the model life. Then he got divorced. That collapse dragged everything down with it. He lost connection with his children, lost motivation, lost direction. He told me, I used to think I was great at controlling emotions, but it turns out I was just suppressing them. I never learned how to live with them. And when I asked him, why didn't you talk to anyone? He paused, then said, because I'm a man. I didn't think I had the right to complain. That answer haunted me, because it wasn't just one man's voice, it was a whole generation's. A generation raised to believe that weakness is failure, that tears are shame, that speaking up lowers your value. So they turned to Stoicism, hoping to live stronger, but instead fall into a false version of it. A version that chokes emotion, strips away softness, and kills compassion. True Stoicism doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. It doesn't disconnect you from emotion. It teaches you to tell the difference between what's real and what's reactive. It doesn't isolate you. It teaches you to connect deeply, steadily, without dependency, without manipulation. And most of all, Stoicism isn't about avoiding pain. It's about learning how to stand with it, steadily. If you're a man and you want to live stoically, start by reading Marcus, Seneca, Epictetus again, not to memorize, but to absorb. Write down what you're feeling. Sit with your sadness instead of rushing to kill it with busyness. Talk to someone you trust, not to get fixed, just to be heard. Because Stoicism never told you to brace yourself to survive. It taught you, let go of what's unnecessary so you can live true to what's essential. And the essential part of being a man isn't hiding emotion. It's understanding yourself, mastering yourself, and treating others with kindness, even when you're hurting. That is what a truly stoic man looks like. This isn't just a video. This is the reminder you needed today. Hit subscribe and like if you want someone in your corner, pushing you to live by your real values. To break free from misunderstanding Stoicism, to stop living inside a false version of it, we must return to its core principles. Not the short, out-of-context quotes scattered online, but the solid pillars that Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus lived by, stood for, and died with. Principle 1. The cognitive gap. Epictetus called it the distinction between impression and response, meaning, when something happens, it's just an event. But the way we interpret that event, that's what determines whether we suffer. Someone insults you, that's their action. But feeling offended, that's your choice. You're unemployed, that's a fact. But deciding, I'm a failure, that's your narrative. Marcus Aurelius wrote, if you feel distressed, it's not because of the event itself, but because of your judgment of it. That's the foundational principle. Nothing outside you can make you suffer, unless you allow it. And this doesn't mean denying emotion. It means recognizing it, then choosing your response. You're no longer a victim of the world, but the master within yourself. Principle 2. Control versus no control. Epictetus opened the Enchiridion with a truth I believe is the root of all inner freedom. There are things that are up to us and things that are not. What's up to us? Perception, desire, response, choice. What's not? What others think, say, do, or what will happen tomorrow. If you keep trying to control what isn't yours, you'll burn out, rage, despair. But if you focus only on what's in your hands, you'll find peace. You can't make someone love you, but you can learn to love yourself and others better. You can't stop people from judging, but you can live so that you don't judge yourself. You can't prevent adversity, but you can control how you walk through it. Stoicism teaches us, don't waste your life chasing what's out of reach. Principle 3. Amor fati. Love your fate, not resignation, not surrender, but a willing embrace of everything that comes your way as part of the path. Seneca wrote, "We don't get to choose our fate, but we do get to choose how fully we live within it." Marcus Aurelius affirmed, "A stone rolling downhill doesn't complain, it follows nature's order." So why should we, as part of the universe, resist what is natural? Loving fate means seeing the lesson in every hardship. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "What can I learn from this?" Amor fati is a posture of living, where you stop fighting what's already here and begin to cooperate with it. You turn pain into power, loss into wisdom. Principle 4. Virtue is the center, not fame, wealth, or status. Marcus was an emperor, but he never let the throne make him forget he was just a man, no better than anyone. Epictetus was a crippled slave, but he never let that social inferiority rob him of his inner freedom. The Stoic doesn't measure value by external success, but by internal integrity. You can be rich and still pathetic, famous and still empty, respected and still ashamed of yourself. You can also lose everything and still keep what no one can take, your dignity. Stoicism teaches us, a virtuous life is the only life worth pursuing to the end. Principle 5. Be a citizen of the world, not an isolated ego. Marcus once said, "What's good for the hive is good for the bee." If you live selfishly, only for yourself, you will eventually rot with the very hive you neglected. The Stoic always places himself in relation to others. He acts with kindness, not because the law demands it, but because he knows true happiness only exists when all live with dignity. You can't call yourself a Stoic and be indifferent to others' pain. You can't call yourself awake if you stay silent in the face of injustice. You can't take pride in your strength if you let the person next to you shatter and don't reach out. Final principle. Stoicism is action, not a shelf philosophy. Seneca once warned, "People collect teachings, but don't live by them." That's not philosophy, it's another form of avoidance. It doesn't matter how many books you've read. What matters is whether you apply them to your life. It doesn't matter how many quotes you can recite. What matters is how you live when you lose your job, get betrayed, or lie awake alone in the dark. Stoicism isn't for talkers, it's for those ready to change. These are the true principles, and if you're looking for a way to not just survive, but to live right, this is the map. Not to show off, I'm a Stoic, but to quietly move closer each day to one thing, inner freedom. And once you touch that, you'll no longer need to brace yourself, no longer need to perform, no longer fear being misunderstood, because at last, you'll begin to truly understand yourself. There's a dangerous misunderstanding I often see, especially among men who are worn down by life and looking for some form of spiritual refuge. They come to Stoicism not to act, but to escape. Escape from pain, escape from responsibility, escape from facing others. They use the excuse "I'm practicing Stoicism" to detach themselves from life, from emotion, from relationships. And that is entirely contrary to the true spirit of this philosophy. Stoicism never taught you to stand apart from life. On the contrary, it demands that you engage, but with deliberate intent, not blindly, not unconsciously, not just to prove something, but action that comes from a deeply still place within. Stoicism doesn't turn you into a hermit on a mountain. It turns you into someone who lives in the middle of the world, but doesn't get swept away by it. Marcus Aurelius wasn't a man who gave up. He was the emperor of Rome, the one steering an empire in chaos. Yet he wrote in his journal each night, asking himself if he had lived rightly. He had to go to war, face rebellion, plague, death, but he didn't give up, didn't run. He lived in the storm and stayed still within. Epictetus was a slave, crippled since childhood, poor, but he never broke. He didn't use philosophy to console himself with, "There's nothing I can do." He used it to stand, to teach, to transform others. Seneca was a politician, an advisor to the emperor, someone who dealt with conspiracies, pressure, betrayal, but he kept writing, kept warning, kept living by the highest ideal. Let me ask you, if those three men in those circumstances still acted, what excuse do we have to say I'm practicing Stoicism while avoiding things we ought to face? I've seen many men say, "I don't get involved emotionally anymore. I'm Stoic now." But really, they're just afraid of getting hurt again. They say, "I don't care about success or failure." But really, they've failed before and are afraid to fall again if they try. They say, "I live mindfully," but in reality, they're exhausted, out of drive, and labeling a state of resignation with a philosophical name. Stoicism is not avoidance, it's the training of will to keep moving forward, even when everything around you is pulling you back. It's not detachment from life. It's deeply intentional action within life, without letting the results shake your mind. You give your all to your work, but you don't equate your self-worth with the paycheck. You love someone genuinely, but you don't let them decide if you're worthy of life. You fight for what's right, but you don't hate your opponents. You speak the truth, but you don't need to win. Stoicism is the union of two things that seem to contradict each other: wholehearted action and total surrender of the outcome. It's not a reason to refuse to act. It's the reason you can act more freely. I remember someone once told me, "I apply Stoicism so I don't have to react to the injustice in my company. I just stay calm." I asked him, "So you think Stoicism means silence in the face of wrong?" No, Epictetus said clearly, if you are a citizen, you must act like one. If you see something wrong, you must speak up, but without being driven by anger. Meaning, you still speak, still act, but do it from a place of reason and kindness. Stoicism doesn't teach us to ignore problems. It teaches us not to be devoured by them. You still live, but you're not controlled by life. You still engage, but you don't get swept away. You still love, but you don't cling. You still strive, but you don't lose your peace if you fail. That's what deliberate engagement means. I went through a time where I sank into resignation. I called it stoicism, but the truth is I was scared. Scared to fail again, scared to hurt again, scared to trust again and lose it. I detached from emotion, from relationships, from all risks, and thought I was calm. But the truth is I was hiding. I wasn't living, I was just existing. And only when I re-engaged with purpose and presence did I feel truly alive again. Stoicism doesn't tell you to run from life. It tells you, walk into it with a mind that's no longer dependent, not blindly engaged, not detached from reality, but fully present as a warrior, ready to accept whatever comes. You love, even knowing you might lose. You contribute, even knowing it might go unrecognized. You act, even knowing you might not win. Because you don't do it to control the result. You do it because it's the right thing to do. And if you understand that, then from now on, you'll stop using philosophy as a mask. You'll start living as a true man. A man who knows what he wants, knows where he stands, and steps into the world. Not to prove himself, but because he's already whole inside. One more common misunderstanding is thinking Stoicism is just a philosophy to read, memorize, and quote. But Stoicism is a practice, and mindfulness is at its core. If you don't have mindfulness, you won't notice emotions when they first appear. And if you don't notice them, you can't control them. And if you can't control them, you'll be dragged around like a kite with no string in a storm. Marcus Aurelius meditated nightly by journaling, not to vent, but to examine himself. Epictetus emphasized the daily need to adjust the mind like a bowstring, so that every action was intentional. Seneca advised, before sleeping, ask yourself, how did I live today? What did I say? How did I react? Mindfulness doesn't require you to meditate for an hour every day. It only requires you to be fully present in each moment. When speaking, know you're speaking. When anger rises, know that it's coming. When you're hurting, observe it instead of reacting to it. So if you want to live stoically, don't start with philosophy. Start with being more awake in every small action. Because Stoicism doesn't begin in the brain, it begins with whether or not you dare to be fully present in your own life. Thank you for being here. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, turn on notifications, and like this video. Don't forget to leave a comment so we can spread positivity together.